Hey everyone, good to see you again. Hope you're having a great week. We are back for part 2 of our Marriages in the Bible study, where we are looking at significant, unusual, famous kind of marriages that we find within Scripture. And so this week we are going to look at the story of Esther and Xerxes. So it should be a fun one. I think it'll be interesting and engaging for everyone. So thanks for watching. So Xerxes, in the Bible, in the book of Esther, he is known as Ahasuerus, however you want to pronounce it. In the book of Esther, that's his name, but everywhere else he would be known as Xerxes, who was the ruler of Persia. And Persia is a country that is located in modern-day Iran. They actually have proof. I believe you can still visit the tomb of Xerxes. And so Xerxes ruled from 486 to 464 BC. He was the son of Darius the Great, the grandson of Cyrus the Great, and he is known for his campaigns against the Greeks, where he actually won. There was a defeat at Marathon, and he came back and avenged that loss. But then he ended up having a crippling defeat, and he just kind of, after that defeat, he gave up trying to even conquer the Greeks. And so that's kind of part of his story. But he's significant. He's very famous. He's known throughout history. He ruled for a pretty good amount of time, was overall pretty successful, and so he was a big deal. And so the fact that there is this amazing, really historical book in Scripture that addresses a lot of who he is really interesting. Esther, she was an orphan. We don't know exactly what happened, but we know that she was not raised by her parents, so we can assume they died or something along those lines happened to them. And she was raised by her older cousin or uncle named Mordecai. And so he was like a father figure to her. He raised her within his household and, was her guardian, responsible for her well-being. And so where the story begins, essentially, is Xerxes, his first wife, is a woman named Vashti. And she was Xerxes' wife, and she embarrassed him because she refused to go to a banquet that he had called, or that he was at least attending. And more than likely, she was probably sick of kind of getting paraded around, probably like a bit of arm candy would be the best way to interpret it. And so she just said, I'm not going. And so she embarrassed Xerxes in front of all of his friends and other powerful rulers. And so he had her banished. We don't know if he killed her or what he did with her, but she was gone out of the picture, no longer his queen. And then Xerxes, to find the love of his life, again, he held a nationwide beauty pageant. Which is certainly an effective way to determine who you should spend the rest of your life with. Kind of like, The Bachelor or those other reality TV shows that shockingly yield terrible results. So he holds this beauty pageant, and Mordecai encourages Esther that she should, be a part of this. And so she goes and, enters the contest effectively. And she's there, and she makes it through all the rounds, or whatever they are, the inspections, or looking at it, how does she rank up with other people, and she wins, and obviously it's disgusting. I don't think that's a good way to plan any kind of relationships, meaningful relationships for sure, or marriages. But this is how it was, and this is how a powerful ruler would have conducted himself. And so this is what he did. And so Esther wins, and she becomes the queen, effectively. And more than likely, I think Xerxes probably expected her to just be more arm candy. Not saying there weren't other events at this beauty pageant. Maybe there were administrative events in diplomacy and conversational skills and education and all this. Maybe those were categories, but all we know is it was effectively a beauty pageant, and she wins it. So she comes in. Small problem. Esther is Jewish, and the Jewish people just always had this very combative relationship with really most of their enemies. They did not have a ton of allies. And so Esther, knowing this about herself and knowing that, they're effectively always going to be marginalized, always kind of looked down upon, always embattled, she hides this from Xerxes. And Mordecai probably honestly recommended it. And I'm sure if there's any other Jewish influences in their lives, they would have said the same thing, because it just would not have improved the situation. She did not come from a family that had a lot of money or a lot of resources that would have, it would have been this kind of alliance, this strategic marriage. She was chosen for her looks, as far as Xerxes was concerned, that's all that he really kind of cared about. So that's the story. She comes into power. She doesn't really come into power necessarily, but she comes into prestige. She's now a member of the royal family. All of these things, and pretty soon afterwards, there is a man named Haman who is the prime minister underneath Xerxes, and I'm sure he was responsible for writing laws and policies and executing ordinances and all that. And so he eventually gets angry at Mordecai because Haman wanted to be worshipped. Haman wanted to be recognized as something special and significant, and everyone was bowing down to him because of his rank, and Mordecai refused. And so Haman figured out, oh man, this guy's Jewish. What I want to do is I want to destroy his people. And so Esther, very early on in her marriage, very tenuous, very fragile, awkward situation, is forced to effectively, take a stand. She is told by Mordecai, perhaps God put you were put into a place for such a time as this. And so Esther has to step up, and really with the encouragement from Mordecai, and just try and figure out a way to save her people. And so really she demonstrates an excellent diplomacy skills. She demonstrates, excellent, just really kind of relationship skills and conversation skills as she steers her husband in a direction. And there's this significant event where she realizes she is going to have to get her husband's attention and ask him for his help. And so she essentially walks into the throne room without his permission, without being summoned, and approaches him. And thankfully he receives her and accepts her, and she says, I've planned a banquet for you, and I would, in your honor, and I would love for you to be there. And she's smart because Vashti, Xerxes' first wife, had shunned and embarrassed Xerxes at a banquet. And so she's using kind of that previous information, kind of to her advantage. And so she holds a couple banquets, couple dinners, couple meals, butters Xerxes up, and even Haman to some degree. And then eventually there is this amazing revelation where she points at Haman and says, this man is trying to kill my people. And Haman rather, had actually built gallows that he was going to hang Mordecai on. So Haman was going to hang Mordecai on these gallows, and in the end he is hanged on the gallows that he had built for other people. So a really kind of cool poetic justice really turns in kind of this really neat way. But when we look at the book of Esther, a really interesting thing is the name of God isn't mentioned at all. God's people are certainly mentioned as the Jewish people and all that, but the name of God is not explicitly mentioned. But the hand of God and really the ways of God are clearly shown. So when you look ultimately at the marriage of Esther and Xerxes, it's not a marriage really that we have an equivalent in modern culture. This is an arranged marriage at best. She probably was intended to just be symbolic. I assume she probably did not have a ton of power, whether that was normal in Persian culture or simply because Xerxes just did not want to have to deal with someone that was going to potentially embarrass him. And so it's just a really awkward situation. You read some commentaries and they essentially will look at it maybe as like almost like a version of slavery, which may possibly have been the intention in the beginning. But the fact that we see Esther rise so significantly out of her station in life, we know that something really significant and something big changes. There is a shift in their relationship, and so I think it's really powerful. She rises above her station in life. She is an orphan with no power. Women in general typically always had to have the authority and the backing of men to really kind of get anything in life and anything that would have carried significance or power within culture. And so for her, she's an orphan, so she doesn't have this. And so she's incredibly vulnerable, incredibly at risk, but she still rises well above, ultimately to save her people. And the God is the one who called her and led her and empowered her to do this. Changes the course of the people, saves their lives by stepping up to a powerful ruler who is known for his military ability and prowess. And so this is a big deal when she steps up. And listen, the reality is Xerxes does not seem like a great guy. He was probably very in line with most kings. Probably was par for the course in terms of the way he treated women and viewed them and looked at marriages. And that's not okay, but he was probably not better or worse. he's powerful and successful, but he seems a little unstable, dismissing his wife after embarrassing him. That's just problematic. I don't really care who you are. So their marriage was odd, for sure. But what's really beautiful about it is that God still uses Esther in those moments. He still uses Esther, even though she had really no pedigree, no foundation that she was really operating from her own family's position. And God still uses her mightily. And so she swings swings through the fences. She punches way outside of her weight, and God blesses her. And so it's really beautiful. So what can we learn from the marriage of Esther and Xerxes? There's all kinds of Hollywood movies, right, where people marry into royal families, and sometimes there's good results, sometimes there's bad ones. We actually have a current one, right? I don't really follow it very well, but I know the royal family in England, one of the sons or princes rejected his throne after marrying a commoner or whatever. So however it works out, you want it to be royal. But what I would say in any marriage is that we need to just be praying for guidance. Whether or not your marriage is going well, whether or not your marriage is easy, whether or not things, are copacetic. We always need to be praying for guidance. There's always going to be problems that arise. There's always going to be issues that arise, and there always will be the tension of, can I fix this on my own with my own power and not have to involve God? Not necessarily in a faithless way, but just in a, I don't want to wait, or I don't want to bother God with this. We need to be willing to pray for guidance. Mordecai calls, for the people to fast, and they are fasting and they are praying for Esther as she has to make this huge decision. So we should be praying for guidance, seeking God, not always relying on our own strength and our own ability, but really trusting how God is going to lead us. The next is how you can be a blessing to others. Esther could have easily just put her head down, ignored her people, and probably lived a very glamorous, wonderful life. But instead, she decided to step up and step out in a significant way, in a way that would have been scary, so that she could be a blessing to other people, so that she could, the resources and the things that have come into her life as blessings, that she could pass them on. And I believe we're called to do the same thing. I believe we are called to share our lives. We're called to go to meals with people. If you're able, invite people into your home. Sharing our lives with other people shows that we believe that God has blessed us so we can be a blessing to other people. We're not called to hoard it. We're not called to just take care of ourselves, but we are called to trust that God, if you've blessed me now, you will continue to bless me. And because of that, I can give to other people. The next is show respect even when not given. This is a huge one. This is a huge detractor, a huge issue within all relationships. If in an unhealthy relationship, there is always a quest, there is always a push, a journey for control and who has the most authority, and typically that manifests itself in where respect is given. And yes, it is so hard to respect someone who does not respect you, and that's a mess. And we could go for hours in on that. But I believe, Scripture says that as much as as much as the responsibility comes on you, as much as it's possible, just according to yourself, live at peace with other people. We're not called to be troublemakers. We're not called to stir things up. We're actually called to live in peace. And specifically within marriages, the idea of servant leadership and putting the other above ourselves is a demonstration of the gospel. And ultimately, that's what we're called to do, is to show Jesus in our lives and in our marriages as well. And then finally, trust God for justice. I have a very strong sense of justice. I do not like when someone is wronged, whether it's a one-time event or an ongoing occurrence, but I have a very strong just internal kind of justice meter. But the reality is I'm a hypocrite, because I want justice for situations outside of myself. I want justice for other people. I want justice for me. I don't want justice for me. I want mercy for me, and I want justice for everything else. I want to be treated justly, but I want to receive mercy when I do something that may be seen as an injustice. And so we need to trust God for justice. And whether this is broadly in our world or specifically within your life, the book of Ezekiel talks about that vengeance is mine, and that God is going to handle justice. God will take care of it. In the end, he will do it in a way that's ultimately satisfying, and that we are tempted to do it ourselves. I believe we are called to trust God for justice, because if we're not careful, we want to be judge, jury, and executioner. And the reality is our feelings would get in the way and we would not administer it perfectly. All right, that is the story, the brief synopsis of Esther and Xerxes. I pray you guys were encouraged. As always, like, comment, share, and subscribe. And just feel free to pass this on to people who may want to watch it. But thanks for watching. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.